Hi guys, what's up, MadSeason here, back with another video for you. As I'm sure you Classic fans know, we've been getting just a ton of updates with the game recently. New schedules, spell batching, loot trading, and now there are even rumblings of a beta starting soon. It seems like every week we're getting these huge updates. Some I've covered, and some I haven't because I don't want the channel to be flooded with 100 update videos, but they're plentiful enough to raise the question, well, where do we stand? I thought then it might make for a handy video to cover the development of World of Warcraft Classic and combine all of the updates into one video to get everyone up to speed with how things are looking so far. So, the obvious starting point would be the official announcement of its existence back in BlizzCon 2017. After years and years of pressure and shutting down private servers, Blizzard finally came out and said, okay, you think you do, and you do, so we're making Classic World of Warcraft. That was pretty much it at this point. We basically got a trailer and hey, we're working on it, which of course whipped the fan base up into a frenzy. What version will it be? Will there be progressive raids? Is there a cash shop? What, shadows will they have? Everything was left up for speculation for months, as our next major update with any substance would be in June of 2018, where Blizzard finally released a blog post regarding Classic called the Dev Water Cooler, which was appropriate because fans were starved and dehydrated for any information regarding Classic. In this post, we finally got an update to what version the game will be set in. Classic, of course, had many patches throughout its lifespan, starting with 1.1 and going to 1.12, so naturally, a big question was what version we were getting. In this post, they confirmed the game to be set in patch 1.12, the reasoning for this being that it's when the game was the most complete. The balance, although imperfect, was in a good place, most zones were fully quested, and so on. And in this post, they also shared some of the technical details behind development, and confirmed that they would be using their modern code and old data to try and emulate the 1.12 experience as best they can. The main reasons for this being the anti-cheat and anti-botting, avoiding latency and stability issues, and just in general, throwing away decades of improvements and optimizations in code isn't exactly the most efficient methodology. This both satiated and worried fans. Well, actually, you could say that about anything with how heated the discussion is. J. Allen Brack could fart, and there would be a 1,000-page thread about it. Is this a vanilla fart? Did the methane form from food prepared in 2004? Does it smell like a fart from 2004? There, look, I think it's trying to tell us something. But nonetheless, the article brought up more questions than answers. Would the modern engine be noticeable? Is 1.12 the right patch? What about the raids? Will they be unlocked all at once, or would they be emulated like the original and released slowly over time? These questions went unanswered for the time being, and the next major event was the announcement of a playable demo at that year's BlizzCon. Both attendees and those watching at home would have access to a limited demo of what they had working so far. The focus was questing in two different zones, and that's Westfall for the Alliance and the Barrens for the Horde, and players would be restricted to levels 15 through 19. There would be no dungeons nor PvP, barring the dueling system of course, so it was pretty limited, but who cares? It's official Classic, and we actually get to play it. Another update was posted shortly after, and they elaborated on their decision to make use of their modern codebase, and confirmed another lingering question, and that's World of Warcraft Classic would have full Battle.net integration, meaning that just like all Blizzard games, you can chat with your Battle.net friends, and join voice chat, and so on while playing Classic. This was good news for some, and bad news for others, as there is a hardcore following for that 100% emulation. For example, this makes talking cross-faction much easier, which eliminates some of that faction separation, which was a bigger aspect back then. It really depends on your perspective. This was when things were really starting to heat up though, as players would be able to data mine the game, and some screenshots of the build that they were using were starting to get leaked, as you can see by this Classic login screen. The day finally came though, at BlizzCon 2018, and players for the first time in 11 years got to revisit the world of Azeroth as it was in its classic state. And what they found was, well, a demo. Just as promised, you could play any class from levels 15 to 19 and do some questing and just soak in the nostalgia of days long past. There were some inaccuracies. The health regeneration was way off, as well as the rogue's energy regeneration, and the loot system was incorrect, and a bunch of various other things, but for the most part, it was Classic World of Warcraft. Along with the demo, we also got a vague release date, and that's summer of 2019, which came as a surprise to many, quite a bit earlier than what most people thought, and it would also be playable with just a normal subscription fee to World of Warcraft. No expansion nor special purchase needed. As you'd expect, the demo raised many more questions, and a good amount of them would be answered in a panel focusing on Classic. In this, they talked a bit more about the technical details about their emulation, and some of the difficulties that they faced using the modern code with the old data, and assured players that an authentic recreation of the original game was paramount, even going as far as keeping that old 16 debuff slot limit on enemies, which had huge implications for endgame class balance. They also confirmed no LFR, no cross-realm grouping, flying, and other modern conveniences that didn't exist in Classic. Conversely, however, they did share some changes that they were planning. Things that they deemed unimportant, such as the lag you used to get with the old mail system, they chose not to emulate, and maybe the character creation screen will look slightly different, and so on. They said that while they're trying to be as authentic as possible, they're not going for pixel point accuracy and things that really have no consequence on the player's gameplay. However, in this list, they also included loot trading. For those who don't know, in the modern game, if you loot an item in a dungeon or a raid or whatever, you can trade it to the other players who were in the group at the time that you looted it. This was introduced because it was common for players to mistakenly loot items. You could always just open up a GM ticket to have the matter resolved, but this saved players the trouble and Blizzard some money, I'm sure. However, players found an issue with this, setting up scenarios where a group of 4 friends were running a dungeon with a random stranger. Essentially, they could all 4 roll on an item, and whoever wins, they just trade it to the person who actually needs it, creating scenarios where people could pretty much be locked out of loot if they don't bring any friends with them. Again, this was still possible in Classic, it's just that players would have to go through a GM, so it was much more work. So the idea here is, because it's so convenient, it'll happen more frequently. Blizzard would later provide an update on this, as I'll explain later. Another issue players found is that the servers used for the demo had sharding. Basically, players who are on the same realm are split up into different shards of the same server. This is done both to prevent stability issues, and so there aren't 1,000 people trying to kill 5 boars. However, Classic didn't have sharding, so it became another heated debate. Some are for it, citing that it's a good thing for the overall health of the game, and others are against it, saying that the community aspect in Classic is what made it special, and it should be left untouched no matter the cost. Blizzard did respond to players' concerns, and they confirmed that although it wouldn't be fully activated at all times in every zone of the game, it is something that they consider helpful at times when there's a high amount of activity in one area, such as the launch of the game. Again, another very heated discussion amongst players, and as it stands today, this is Blizzard's position on the matter. Another big piece of news, however, was the announcement of a content release schedule. One of the questions I posed earlier was, are the raids all being released at launch? Or what about the PvP system, which didn't exist until patch 1.4? Well, we got an answer to these questions. Now, the original schedule was in 4 phases, seen here, but I won't go into this too much because it was actually updated months later to the 6-phase schedule. No specific dates yet, because we don't even have a release date for the game, but first, just talking PvE here, we have Phase 1, which is the release raids, the Molten Core and Onyxia, just like how it was in 2004, and also the Dungeon Maraudin, which originally came a couple months after release. For Phase 2, we have the Dire Maul Dungeon, as well as the raid bosses Azurgos and Kazakh. Phase 3 includes the Blackwing Lair raid and the Darkmoon Fair, and Phase 4 we have Zul'Gurub and the Green Dragon World bosses. Phase 5 sees the release of AQ40 and AQ20, along with the accompanying war effort, as well as updates to the dungeon loot, which came around the same time. And lastly, for Phase 6, we have the final raid of Vanilla, which is of course Nexramus, and the Scourge Invasion to mark its release. All of these are pretty close in relation to each other, and this came as huge news as it's a much more accurate emulation than the original release schedule. It's not exact, of course. As I mentioned, Classic had 12 patches, but still, it's pretty close. And they also noted that certain aspects of itemization would also be following this plan. Of course, as you'd imagine, more and more powerful items would be slowly added to the game. Some would say are too powerful to be raiding the Molten Core or Onyxia with, so these two will also be released along with the phase that they deem to be the most appropriate. Specifically for now, they said that it would be Phase 5, which is the Ahn'Qiraj phase. So that's all of the PvE stuff. This was updated even further on April 8th to include PvP scheduling. Obviously, at Phase 1, we have PvP in the game just as it was. You can kill anyone you want, there's just no reward other than the satisfaction of crushing some Horde scum. And in Phase 2, which is the Dire Maul and Outdoor Raid Boss phase, we're seeing the honor system being released, along with the PvP rank rewards. This is that old rank 14 system where you now get honor for kills, which allows you to climb rank and get better and better rewards the higher rank that you get. In Phase 3, which is the Blackwing Lair and Darkmoon Fair phase, we see the release of Altric Valley and the Warsong Gulch battlegrounds. These two released together originally, so you can see just how closely that they're trying to emulate it here. And Phase 4, which is Zul'Gurub and Green Dragons, we have the Great Arathi Basin battleground. And lastly, for Phase 6, we have the World PvP objectives in Silithus and the Eastern Plaguelands. If you remember, you could collect Silithist in Silithus, or capture towers in the Eastern Plaguelands, and PvP there for some rewards. As I recall, these didn't see much use on my server, but hey, it's there. So, PvE and PvP, all of it is seeing a release schedule closely emulating the original timeline back in 04 to 07. Going into more detail with the Altric Valley though, a small caveat here is that the battleground itself saw some big changes over its lifespan, even in vanilla. In general, from its release to the launch of the Burning Crusade, it was made to be easier with the removal of guards and other various nerfs, and it was confirmed that the version to be released in Phase 3 is the final 1.12 vanilla version, nerfs and all. So again, while they're pretty close in most aspects, it's not an exact recreation. A big deal for some, and not so much for others. But while we're on the subject of PvP, we did also receive an update on spell batching. This is how the servers process inputs from the players. Trying not to get too technical here, basically the system used to be more inefficient back in the day, and specifically in a PvP setting, you could have situations where players could activate spells at certain times that they shouldn't be able to activate. A good example they gave was a warrior pummeling a mage's polymorph. Back then, it was actually quite common that you could get a pummel off while a mage is sheeping you, but you still get sheeped because the inputs arrived in the same batch. As someone who played a rogue back then, there were some nifty tricks that you could do with your banish spell. You could basically negate any other spell if you had proper timing. Most of the time for me, it was just luck, because as you'd imagine, it takes a certain amount of finesse and experience to be able to anticipate other people's actions, but even still, it happened pretty frequently, all things considered. So, a big question was if this was something they were also going to emulate, and they said yes. Again, it's not exact, they're kind of doing it in a roundabout way, but in a March of 2019 post, they stated that it's something that they're looking to recreate to better match the flow of combat in vanilla World of Warcraft. I mentioned earlier that I would reference the loot trading again. This also saw an update in March of 2019. Due to player feedback, Blizzard decided to rethink their philosophy regarding loot trading, and they decided to take out that 2-hour window for anything other than raids, acknowledging its potential for abuse. The mindset here is if you're in a raid, everyone is probably trustworthy or in a guild with each other, and if you're pugging it, that's sort of a risk you're already taking. Note that they are considering the Blackrock Spire a dungeon with these rules, so no loot trading in there either. They also said that GMs would not step in if players actually did loot an item to the wrong person, so you gotta be careful. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the latest piece of news is that through some digging, players have found out that Blizzard put up a Classic beta on their content delivery network. This turned out to actually be an alpha for just Blizzard friends and family, but it could be a sign of a beta approaching in the not-so-distant future. And that's where we stand right now. That's what we know about Official Classic from its announcement at BlizzCon 2017 to today. As it stands, everyone is just waiting in anticipation for a beta announcement so we can see how the game has progressed since that demo release. To sign up yourself, just go to your Blizzard account page and find your beta profile settings and make sure that Warcraft is ticked. From there, it's just waiting and hoping that you get in once the beta is actually announced. So, in summary, we have a 6-phase content release schedule for both PvE and PvP, spell batching, 16 debuff slot limit. These are all things that are being emulated pretty closely to the original. The exceptions would be that Sharding for heavy population loads, and 1.12 Altric Valley, and that pseudo loot trading, which will be in raids, but not for dungeons. There are a couple of miscellaneous things that I wanted to include here just for the sake of it. I won't go over all of these one by one because it would be like a 40-minute video, but through various interviews and whatnot, they have shared some of the more finer details of what's happening and what isn't. For example, right-click player reporting is in, which is a big deal for some people, and as for the stuff that's not in, we have that quality of life stuff such as dungeon and raid finder, flying mounts, and so on. And also things like class balance will of course be in its 1.12 state. We're getting some accessibility stuff such as colorblind mode, an option for classic graphics, and as for the macro and add-on systems, they did say that they are using a hybrid of the new system, but with limitations as a mix to prevent exploits and such, but still also try to keep it pretty close to classic.
We're actually kind of suspicious of these and skeptical about the possibility of add-ons reproducing some of the functionality that we've deliberately removed from Classic that we feel could be harmful to the authentic experience. We're likely going to find some kind of middle ground that combines the old and the new here, with a goal towards making sure that the vast majority of the add-ons that people know and expect function with the goal of an authentic experience.
All in all, for those looking for an experience that's pretty close to the original, things are looking good. The communication has been superb, and in fact, I have a feeling that this video will be outdated pretty soon here, because we've just been getting so many updates recently. I do plan on covering them here and there within reason, so check out my latest videos to see if anything has changed, and I hope that you found this video helpful in getting you up to speed in the development of World of Warcraft Classic. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.